Chapter 13. The gates of Zool stood before them. The guard was on either side, sitting cross-legged, guzzling wine and gnawing on what could only be cooked goblin arms. Alan expected them to jump to their feet and brandish their pikes, but they smiled and waved to the visitors. One did stand, spreading his arms in welcome. He said something in Galgi. "Skrakrugza, Ikila."
"Skrakrugza," Wit responded.
The guard laughed and said something else.
"Akjagzil trastwa."
Wit bowed respectfully.
"Hit. Zagrias. Igen pervor trazabriel."
The guard shrugged and entered through a door in the wall. A moment later, the gates began to open. The place was extremely dirty. The ghouls were sharing this town with trillions upon trillions of microscopic organisms. The smell of rotten decay was palpable. The homes were little shacks no bigger than Alan's bedroom, stacked in scawampus ways that were frankly impressive from an architectural perspective. The people were so numerous it wouldn't have been surprising if they had been stacked on each other's shoulders in a similar fashion.
"This place is a corpse,"
Jake whispered. His fear had been replaced by a sort of melancholy. Indeed, despite the citywide celebration going on around them, the sadness of this place was as pungent as the muck in the streets. A filthy, crowded people having won a battle, but still so filthy and crowded.
"No talk,"
Ward hissed, fairly enough. They moved uneasily through the narrow streets, careful not to step in the numerous puddles of brown and black God knows what. There was a heap of garbage in an alley swarming with enormous maggots. A female ghoul slept beside it, the half-eaten head of a goblin on the ground nearby. One of the maggots inched through the dirt toward the food.
"Babies,"
whispered Whimsy. Alan realized she was talking about the maggots. That made him feel uncomfortable, though he couldn't say exactly why. Thankfully, the scene was soon out of sight. After about 15 or 20 minutes, they finally got to the square at the center of town. There were ghouls all over, drinking and singing and playing games. Off to the side was a handful of huge metal cylinders topped with grills, where goblin flesh was being cooked with weed-like leaves and gnarled root vegetables. Alan felt bad for even thinking it, but this part of town smelled delicious. A building like a Gothic cathedral loomed over them, dwarfing the surrounding edifices. As they got closer, they saw that the outer walls were embedded with hundreds of bones. Entire skeletons from a dozen intelligent species stared out at them with gaping jaws, as if screaming for release from the hard mortar. The party quickly made their way past the bleak menagerie and through the open doors of the building. Laura followed the wind southwest to the side wall of Zool. She walked along, eyes peeled for any sign of where to climb. About 2/3 of the way down, she watched a bird land on the wall and release a glob of shit before flying away. The black and white goop dribbled down the bricks. She could see that it was a perfect place to climb. Plenty of footholds and no warm bodies in sight.
"You prick,"
she whispered to her friend. A sign was a sign. She stepped up to the wall and began to ascend. It took about 2 minutes to make it to the top, at which point she swung around sideways to avoid the bird's little gift. Usually, when Ezzy did something like this, it had a practical reason. All right then, whatever. She found a ladder and descended into the alley below. The air was fucking rank. There was a thick layer of soft, dark brown something coating the ground. No choice but to wade through it. She flinched as a pair of shapes darted across her path, squealing. Just a couple rats. She kept walking until she emerged into a narrow cobbled street. She looked in each direction. To her left, another rat crept out from under some trash, but that was it. She followed the creature as it scuttled through the gutter and around a bend. Following that street for a while brought her directly behind the towering building at the center of town. There was a maintenance door at the back, and, surprise, surprise, it was unlocked. She could see a guard on the other side through her goggles. Without stepping through, she opened the door a crack, stuck her arm in, and stabbed the fucker's throat. He gurgled, fell, and started bleeding out. She realized she should have stolen his outfit, but it was already drenched in blood. She kicked the corpse and looked around through the walls. To the left was a storage room, and to the right was a kitchen. Past that was the Bielzark's living quarters with a crib full of writhing maggots. She swallowed her vomit. Further down the hall she was in, she found the armory. There was a set of guards' armor just sitting there. She took a moment to strap on a breastplate and a helmet. That would do. She looked through the wall at the throne room. The others had gotten in. They looked okay. And there was Gnurgle, sitting on a throne atop a ludicrously high step platform. He wasn't wearing the mask. Everything was looking up in the town of Zool. The people were swept up in a great celebration like none Verks had ever seen, even back in the good times, and already here was a group of refugees, come for asylum like Verks himself and untold others. There were 2 males and 3 females. It was odd that the one addressing him was a woman, but she said the others came from the east where they didn't speak Galji. It wasn't uncommon for the displaced to find each other on the road and band together. It was a tale of the ghoul spirit. It was the story of Zul itself. She told a long and stilted, nervous tale about having lived under the thumb of a brutish troll, and about meeting these new friends with whom she'd made the trek to Verks's doorstep. Verks was moved by their plight. He spread his arms and wings wide.
Vermila, he said. Ax genzochlius azulietet. Pagliu halila genzochlius azulika.
Children, you are welcome to Zul. All ghouls are welcome in Zul. The woman bowed graciously and translated his words to her companions. Her voice was quiet, and he couldn't tell what tongue she spoke in. He began descending the stairs.
Kiercielo, pangulia sulexi curiusa.
Surely you are all very hungry. He called out,
Garf.
To the left of the platform, Garf tapped his pike on the floor in attention.
Liustasie merziglos hospigulieretre.
Bring some goblin meat for our guests. Garf bowed and exited through the nearby door. The new Beelzark smiled at his new friends.
Zagzigl,
He said, speaking meat.
Orexila zuli su agruvli. Orexila su lertarculi.
The laws of this land, the laws of the queen, he spat.
Torexila zuli su novur natauliga lierzavat.
Are not the laws of this new ghoul nation. Garf returned a moment later with a steaming platter of only the best cuts. Verks wafted the aroma and pinched off a morsel for himself before directing the guard to deliver the treat to the newcomers. They took the platter hesitantly.
Faustos, he said. Cru. Agzabalag so terroria jur. Quas cagliu machrila, mistruk. Jegn kas griazak o gietre. Aglzigl.
Go on, eat. You have nothing to fear. If she sends more soldiers, we will thank her for it. More meat. He laughed, and the guards laughed too. The visitors nodded to each other, bowed to their beneficent host, and began to eat. Verks laughed again.
Zivlu novu periusa. Un novu periu quo navalex costerorto.
This is a new age where none will be afraid to... There was a gurgle and a grunt. Verks twirled around just in time to see Garf tumble to the floor, dead. Above him stood a vicious-looking Leltu, grinning wickedly at the Beelzark. She was wearing guard's armor, but he had never seen her before. He didn't waste time dwelling on the situation. He ran back toward the throne where the mask rested, nestled in the pillows. Why had he ever taken it off? As he reached the first step, however, a sharp, hot pain erupted in his back. He turned to see the visitor he'd been speaking with. A small crossbow was trembling in her outstretched hands. He reeled for too long, and Garf's murderer was instantly upon him. She held a dagger to his throat.
Zevlexa,
He hissed. Who are you? She laughed like a thrilled lover, and the illusion faded away. There should have been no question. It was the human huntress, back again to finish this once and for all. The visitors were probably goblins wearing glamours of their own. How clever of them to eat the flesh of their own sisters. He would never have guessed that they possessed such spirit. Verks knew immediately that there was no way out of this. Even if he had the mask, this human was a powerful magician, the likes of which Verks had never even heard of. And a bloodthirsty killer, the likes of which he knew all too well. And that was the joke, wasn't it? The kind of jest that the keeper spun like oh so many twisting threads of the cob. It was beautiful once he grasped it. This was not an enemy whose blade now sliced through his neck, but a sort of keeper herself. The blood poured out, warming his skin as it made its way back toward the earth, and he knew that one of his own kind had bested in this day. It was the way of things, and only a fool or a coward would struggle, cry out, or beg in this moment. So Verks let himself fall away. The world grew dark until it faded completely, and he was adrift in the eternal blackness of the abyss. Then, invisible at first, the darkness slowly became punctuated by a million faint glimmering strands of gold and crimson. They grew in brightness, and he became tangled among them. One more of the unending number of souls who would settle at last into the cob. As the light reached a brilliance that no mortal could ever withstand, her icy fangs dug into his back, and he was swallowed inside out, dissolved like all the rest into the waiting jaws of the keeper. It happened so fast, there was no way he could have stopped her. As Verks turned to run, Wit took the crossbow from Jake's belt and fired. He just stood there dumbly as it unfolded. Laura wrapped herself around the ghoul, a spider on a fly. There was so much blood. It streaked across Carver's face like war paint, and she looked delighted. She held on to the body until every drop of life had drained away, and then she dropped it like a sack of potatoes and simply radiated satisfaction. The blood spread out across the shiny stone floor. Soon, the other colorful fluids followed. The stink of Verksknurgel's final BM hit Jake's nose and he vomited. There were tiny chunks of partially digested goblin meat in the bile. God, had he really had to eat that? He'd been so scared, and he'd just pretended it was something else. He retched and dry-heaved. Everything got loopy. Was he tripping? Was he about to wake up on his bed, go downstairs, and eat tacos? For real this time? A tremor jiggled up his spine. Someone stuck something dark and reflective in his face. When he didn't respond immediately, she shook it. "Hey, dipshit," said Laura. "This is yours, isn't it?" He blinked. She was trying to hand him his cell phone. He took it. The battery had run dry. It felt cold and lifeless in his hands. A corpse. He blinked again and shoved the dead thing in his pocket. He looked up to see Laura strapping on the mask of sight. "Let's see what this thing can do," she said. She looked around, then struck a pose. "Jakey, take a picture." "We need to leave," said Whit. She looked shaken. Laura's crossbow dangled loosely from her finger. Her hand was trembling. She'd shot someone. Jake realized that she had eaten the meat too. They all had. Laura nodded. "She's right. Let's GTFO, boys and girls." She strode toward the rear door she had come from with a truly vulgar skip in her step. Everyone followed. They passed a few more dead bodies on the way to the exit. Laura led them out and through the empty back streets up a ladder to the walkway at the top of the wall. Whimsy went first. She was uncharacteristically silent and calm. As soon as she began to climb, they heard a shrill, horrified scream from the direction they had come. Then shouts, then more cries. Shocked, distraught, furious ghouls would soon be on their tail. The party climbed as fast as they could. Laura stared in the direction of Town Hall, no doubt gazing through the walls for enemies. She looked mostly unconcerned, chipper even, but God only knew whether that was good or bad. They all made it to the top before any pursuers were visible. It was a long way down the other side, but Laura used the mask to help everyone safely to the ground. Then they ran like their asses were on fire toward the place where Ken and H would be waiting. The two must have heard the screams because they were standing right there at the edge of the trees looking nervous. They reached them faster than should have been possible. Ken howled and gave Jake and Al a death grip hug. Laura was about to unstrap the mask, but H stopped her.
"Leave it on for now," he said, "just in case."
She shrugged. "Fine by me." Al pried himself away from Ken's paws and asked her, "Do you see anyone coming? I mean, going to come? Like, in the potential future? That's how it works, right?" Laura looked over her shoulder at Zool and stared for a minute. Finally, she nodded. "Uh-huh. They come running out the gates, but they're disorganized. Kenny's ripping some throats out, and... Wow, you take my crossbow and shoot someone in the neck." "Ha ha, good one," Jake mocked. "I wasn't joking," she insisted. "But it's gone now. I must have changed it."
Al stuttered. "Was it cool?"
"No. Come on, we gotta move. They're gonna show up in like 8 seconds.
"Jeez," cried Jake. "The hell are we doing digging around here for?"
Literally without a second to lose, the brownies leapt onto shoulders, and they all started running northward, back into the hills. They slowed down pretty quick, though. H and Ken were still hurt, and none of them were in half as good a shape as Laura. Thankfully, there was no sign of anyone on their tail yet, so they allowed themselves to breathe. After a few minutes, something appeared on the road ahead. It emerged around a bend from behind a thicket, a horse-drawn carriage driven by H's friend from before. Sitting at the front beside him was that creepy-ass black wolf. He waved to them, and H waved back, letting out a gruff chuckle.
"What took you so long, Marcus?"
"You know, there's actually a funny story," the man said as he pulled up alongside them. The party wasted no time in getting aboard. Marcus turned the cart around and set the horses trotting back north.
"Did you ride all the way back to the colony?"
"Oh, you know, I thought about it. Figured there weren't a real rush, but I ran into this feller." "Duck!" Laura yelled suddenly. Jake didn't know who she was talking to, but he and Al crouched down in their seats all the same.
"Duck," said Marcus. "What the hell you..."
"Fucking duck!" She reached through the front and shoved the man forward and down, just as an arrow shot through the carriage directly where his head had been. He turned around to absorb the fact that Laura was wearing H's mask, then looked out on the road behind them. Shit! He swiveled back to whip the horses into a gallop. Behind them, a crowd of ghouls was in hot pursuit. 2 archers were on horseback, the rest on foot. As the carriage sped down the road, the running ghouls fell behind and out of sight, but the cavalry was actually catching up. Laura took her crossbow and, taking advantage of the mask of sight, fired a bolt into each of the archers' brains. They toppled off their horses and fell into the dust. No other ghouls in sight, the carriage was able to decelerate a little.
Hoo-wee, Mark shouted. That was some good shooting, kid. When are you going to give in and join the guard?
Never, Colonel. It's never going to happen, she said. The man shrugged.
You keep saying that, but you know I'm going to keep asking.
Whatever. Tanner made a low woof.
Hey, that's right, said Mark.
He turned to the boys.
You kids did a pretty good job back there, too. I've already got the papers ready for Mr. Brownfield.
He winked. Papers? Jake asked.
Oh, sure. There ain't a wolf in the country who isn't registered.
Why does he have to be registered? He's not dangerous.
Oh, it's not about all that. Wolves do a lot better in packs. They get depressed and aggressive on their own. I've heard they can even die of loneliness.
Ken let out a whine, then barked softly. Heartless cleared his throat.
These kids have been through a lot the past couple days. Let's hold off on worrying about all that.
He turned to face them, and a gentle smile spread across his mask.
You guys just hang out with us at HSB for now, okay? You don't have to worry about anything until you're ready.
They had to admit that was nice to hear. The looming threat of death was slowly waning. With the inventor's permission, Al, Jake, and Laura took turns looking through the mask of sight. May as well, since it was about to be locked away forever. Even Whimsy took a peek through its crystalline eyes. Shit got weird fast, though, and remembering all the chaos, death, and destruction it had caused, Jake lost his appetite for it. Pretty soon, H took it back once and for all. A satisfied calm had settled over the party by the time they got back to Amuma. The colony seemed more heavily guarded than they had left it, but they were given a warm welcome. Once again, they were made to wait for untold ages in the room with that terrible statue. Finally, the Queen appeared personally and confiscated the mask. She thanked everyone for their efforts and quickly retreated deeper under the mount with two horrifyingly buff myrmidons. Then Mark left with Tanner, not before casually mentioning again how the guard was welcoming all applicants, and the rest of them climbed back into H's horseless carriage and set off back towards HSB. Just as the man was disappearing from sight, H got a call on his little vanity mirror. He sounded happy at first, then concerned, maybe a little angry, and finally frustrated and determined as he hung up. He turned up the torture on his sylph ball, and they accelerated. "What's wrong?" asked Al.
"Someone broke into HSB. Evie and the guys got hurt."
They arrived with windswept hair to the garage at the top of the building. They couldn't see any damage from up here, but only a small bit of the third-story wall was visible. H practically leapt out of the car, and they all followed him downstairs. Nikki, B, and S were all in S's room waiting for them. Her arm was wrapped up in a sling, and she had a light bruise on her cheek. B had clotted slashes across his face and legs. S was nursing a sprained ankle. When S saw them, he roared like a fucking animal.
"And that troll's gonna lose his hands if I'm nice to him."
"Troll?" asked Jake. Nikki nodded. He went to her side. "He came back?" "Yeah. He smashed up the kitchen and waiting room. He might have destroyed the whole building if we hadn't cut off his finger." She pointed to the dresser, where there was indeed the bloody severed tip of a troll's pinky. "That's hardcore," said Al. "He could have killed you," said Jake, knowing Max's strength from experience.
"Damn right he could have," said H.
"Which means," Laura said gleefully, "that the act was premeditated." H nodded.
"Measured, at least. Which means it falls into the jurisdiction of bounty hunters."
Whimsy whooped. Nikki tried to clap without much success. "You don't know how long I've wanted to kick that troll's head off," said Laura.
"So?"
said H. S shifted in his seat.
"Yes." "Drop another contract for Miss Carter, would you?" "With pleasure."
Laura put an unwelcome hand on Jake's shoulder. "You kiddos want to help me catch a troll?" Jake wanted to tell her to fuck right off until he took another look at Nikki's arm. He sighed and nodded. "Yeah, okay."